And I don't think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and that's abs that will remain true. The silence has finally been broken. For generations, the British monarchy has lived by one ironclad rule. Never complain, never explain. A wall so thick that wars, scandals, and family ruptures have crashed against it without leaving a crack. Something has now shattered it from the inside. Princess Anne, the hardest working royal, 5 decades of quiet, dignified service behind her, has spoken. Not through a press release or palace spokesperson directly, personally, and with a fury those present described as barely contained. What she confirmed has turned everything upside down. The Saudi dossier exists, 3 words. And according to sources close to the inner circle, Prince Harry's reaction was not anger or defiance. It was devastation, because if Princess Anne is telling the truth, and in 50 years of public life, she has never been caught in a lie, then everything Harry believed about his family's betrayal, everything in his memoir, everything he and Meghan told Oprah may have been built on sand. This is not rumor, tabloid speculation, or palace gossip. It is a documented source story about intelligence failures, unexplained wealth, secret alliances, and a royal family facing the most consequential crisis of the modern era. It all begins with a file that was never supposed to see the light of day. The vetting that changed everything. Let's go back. Autumn 2016, London. The leaves are falling and Prince Harry is falling in love. When a member of the British royal family begins a serious relationship, standard protocol kicks in immediately. A multi-tiered security vetting process is activated, not as a formality, not as an insult to the individual being vetted, but as a non-negotiable institutional safeguard. This process involves palace security officers working in close coordination with British intelligence services. It covers outstanding debts, criminal associations, financial irregularities, foreign connections, and any background details that could represent a risk to the crown. In most cases, the process is routine. It takes a few weeks, produces a thin folder of unremarkable findings, and everybody moves on. With Meghan Markle, something very different happened. And we want you to sit with that for a moment, because the implications are enormous. What could a cable television actress from Los Angeles, a woman best known at that point for playing a paralegal on a mid-tier legal drama, have in her background that would cause British intelligence to sit up and take notice? What could possibly be so unusual, so contradictory, so difficult to explain away that alarm bells started ringing not just in the palace security office, but deep within the intelligence community itself? According to well-placed palace insiders, the answer came down to one thing: an impossible financial contradiction. A gap so wide between Meghan's publicly known income and her documented lifestyle that it simply could not be explained away. Here are the facts as they have been laid out. Between 2008 and 2012, Meghan Markle's professional career was modest by any objective measure. She was a working actress in Los Angeles, a city that chews up and spits out talented, driven, ambitious people every single day. She held briefcases on a game show. She appeared in forgettable episodes of forgettable television programs. Her most recognizable recurring role, the one she would eventually become famous for before Suits, paid relatively standard television rates for a supporting performer. Nothing glamorous, nothing extraordinary. The public narrative that she herself cultivated and which made her eventual rise to royalty so compelling was the story of a struggling actress who hustled her way from obscurity to a palace. It was a beautiful story. It was also, according to the intelligence report, not entirely accurate. Because while Meghan's bank statements and documented income told one story, surveillance data, travel logs, photographic evidence, financial forensics told a completely different one. The dossier, sources allege, placed this struggling actress on Mediterranean super yachts worth tens of millions of pounds. It documented her presence at exclusive invitation-only gatherings in Monaco. Events where a single evening costs more than most working people earn in a year. It showed her circulating comfortably, repeatedly, and systematically through the closed social circles of Gulf elites and Middle Eastern power brokers. Not once, not by accident, but across multiple years, across multiple locations in a pattern that stretched from California to the Mediterranean, from Monaco to Istanbul. Now, we want to ask you something directly because this is important. How does a struggling actress fund a lifestyle like that? How does someone earning standard television rates afford first-class international travel, luxury accommodation in Monaco during Grand Prix season, Designer wardrobes appropriate for events attended by billionaires and royal families. Let's do the actual maths because the numbers are staggering when you lay them out. A first-class return flight from Los Angeles to Monaco in 2010 would have cost somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000. The hotels in Monaco during peak season, the yacht show, the Grand Prix, in celebrating the 125th anniversary of women's suffrage in your country, run a minimum of $1,000 per night and frequently much more for the properties where these kinds of events take place. Designer evening wear appropriate for these circles. The kind of gown that signals you belong in the room runs between $5 and $20,000 per outfit. Add hair, makeup, accessories, private transfers, and you are looking at expenses that would comfortably exceed $50,000 for a single week. And the photographs in the dossier don't show a single week. They show a pattern that repeated across years. Someone was paying for this. Someone was booking the flights, reserving the suites, covering the wardrobes, and ensuring that a cable television actress from Los Angeles was consistently present in some of the most exclusive and expensive social environments on Earth. The question that Princess Anne reportedly asked, the question she would later say she tried to put directly to Prince Harry, is the question that changes everything. Who paid for all of this? And what did they expect in return? Princess Anne's warning. We need you to understand something about Princess Anne before we go any further because her credibility in this story is absolutely central. This is not a woman who speaks carelessly. This is not a woman who has ever chased headlines, courted controversy, or sought public attention for personal gain. In over 5 decades of royal service, Princess Anne has completed more public engagements than virtually any other member of the royal family. She has worked tirelessly, quietly, and without complaint. She does not do drama. She does not seek the spotlight. When she has opinions, and she clearly has many, she keeps them within the family, within the institution, within the walls where such conversations belong. So when Princess Anne decides to speak, you listen. And what she allegedly told Harry in a private meeting, a meeting that insiders say permanently fractured their relationship, was not about class, not about race, and not about royal protocol. It was about national security. She laid the dossier on the table, and she pointed Harry to a specific term used by intelligence analysts that we think everyone watching this needs to understand. Strategic social placement. Let us explain what that means because it is at the very heart of everything that followed. In the world of Gulf elites, international oligarchs, and the power brokers who operate in the shadowy space between legitimate finance and geopolitical influence, there exists a well-documented practice of cultivating certain individuals for strategic purposes. It is not crude espionage in the traditional sense. There are no dead drops, no fake identities, no stolen documents. It is far more sophisticated than that. The way it works is this. An attractive, intelligent, socially adept individual is identified as potentially useful to a network or a patron. They are then systematically introduced into elite social circles, invited to the right events, connected to the right people, given access to the right rooms. Their lifestyle is quietly subsidized. Their access is carefully facilitated. And over time, they become embedded in the network, trusted by its members, and positioned to serve a function. That function might be purely social, providing access to new connections, facilitating introductions, being seen with the right people in the right places. It might be relational, building relationships with individuals that the network has identified as strategically valuable. Or it might be reputational, lending credibility and glamour to individuals and events that benefit from association with someone charming, well-spoken, and camera-ready. None of this is illegal in a straightforward sense. But in the intelligence community, when you see the same individual appearing repeatedly across elite Gulf and Middle Eastern networks over multiple years with no apparent means of funding that lifestyle independently, it raises profound questions about patronage, obligation, and influence. Princess Anne, sources say, explained all of this to Harry in terms that were direct, specific, and supported by photographic evidence. She showed him the timeline. She showed him the travel records. She showed him the social connections. And then reportedly she said something that Harry found utterly unforgivable. She told him that someone with money connections and a specific interest in her access had been cultivating her for years. And she warned him with language that was by multiple accounts chillingly precise that people don't get kept in these circles unless they are useful. She wasn't being cruel. She was being accurate. She was doing what she has always done, telling an uncomfortable truth clearly without softening it for the benefit of someone's feelings. But Harry, utterly consumed by what he believed was the great romance of his life, did not see a warning from a trusted family member with access to classified intelligence. He saw an attack. He saw racism dressed up as concern. He saw the same institutional prejudice he had long believed was directed at the woman he loved. And so he buried the report. He dismissed the evidence. He told the people around him that his family would never accept Meghan. Think about the tragedy embedded in that moment. Can you imagine being in Anne's position? You are holding a classified intelligence file. You are sitting across from your nephew, a young man you have watched grow up, a man still carrying wounds from his mother's death, a man desperately searching for love and stability. And you know something about the woman he intends to marry that he simply cannot bring himself to hear. You try to protect him. You lay the evidence in front of him. You speak as plainly as you know how, and he walks away thinking you are the villain. The handler in plain sight. For years, one name kept appearing in the background of this story, and the mainstream media consistently presented him in the most benign possible terms. Marcus Anderson, described publicly as Meghan's close friend, a charming and well-connected consultant in the world of luxury hospitality, a loyal and supportive presence in her life, the coverage was uniformly warm. The characterization was consistently harmless. But in the classified sections of the Palace vetting report, Princess and allegedly identified him in terms that were anything but harmless. The word used according to sources who have seen the relevant intelligence assessments was handler. Now that is an extraordinary term in intelligence circles. A handler is someone who manages an asset. Someone who facilitates their access, maintains their cover, directs their movements, and ensures they remain useful to whoever is ultimately directing the operation. It is not a word you apply to a well-meaning friend. So, why would British intelligence use that language about Marcus Anderson? Let's look at what we know about him. He was at the time of Meghan's relationship with Harry, the global membership director of Soho House, the private members club network that serves as a nexus point for celebrities, financiers, media executives, and international power brokers across multiple continents. The kind of institution where the guest list at any given evening could include Oscar winners, hedge fund managers, politicians, and members of Gulf royal families, all in the same room, all operating under the discreet social contract that nothing said at Soho House is intended for public consumption. Anderson's specific skill, by all accounts, was not hospitality. It was connections. He understood intuitively and professionally who needed to know whom. He was extraordinarily skilled at engineering introductions that benefited all parties involved. And in 2015, the year before Meghan met Harry, Anderson was reportedly at the center of an event that the Palace Intelligence Report allegedly flagged as highly significant. The grand opening of Soho House, Istanbul. Why does Istanbul matter? Because Istanbul is geographically and culturally the crossroads of East and West. It is where European sophistication meets Middle Eastern capital. It is a city where deals are made that never appear in any official record, where relationships are formed that exist entirely off the books, and where talent and money meet in ways that are deliberately designed to leave no paper trail. Intelligence sources suggest that the Istanbul opening was not simply a glamorous party. It was in effect a marketplace, a carefully curated environment where ambitious individuals with social capital were introduced to wealthy patrons with the resources to open doors and the motivation to do so. And Meghan Markle, the dossier allegedly indicates, was introduced at this event to a specific network of Middle Eastern financiers and Gulf power brokers. The same network that would subsequently show up repeatedly in those yacht photographs. The same network that explains the impossible financial arithmetic of her pre-royal social life. Here is what makes the Istanbul connection so significant. And we want you to think carefully about this. The event took place in 2015, just months before Meghan would be introduced to Prince Harry. If the intelligence assessment is correct, by the time she walked into the room where Harry was waiting, she would already have been fully integrated into an elite international network. She would have understood the unspoken rules of those circles, the expectations, the dynamics, and the way relationships in those spaces are structured. And then here is the detail that once you hear it is very difficult to set aside. Harry and Meghan met on a blind date in London in 2016. Arranged by a mutual friend. That mutual friend was Marcus Anderson. The man Princess Anne's intelligence report allegedly identified as Meghan's handler was the same man who introduced her to the fifth in line to the British throne. We are not going to tell you what to conclude from that. We are going to ask you, what do you conclude from that? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now because we genuinely want to know what you think. The bombshell and finally dropped. December 2025. A date that will be marked in royal history. Not for a celebration, not for a coronation, not for a jubilee, but for the day that Princess Anne finally decided she had carried a terrible secret for long enough. The setting was deliberate and telling. Not Buckingham Palace, not Windsor Castle, not any of the grand official residences of the Crown. She chose Gatcombe Park, her private residence, her personal sanctuary, the one place in England where she answers to no one and operates entirely on her own terms. This was not an official royal statement. It was not vetted by palace communications teams or approved by the Lord Chamberlain's office. This was Princess Anne speaking as herself on her own property in front of a carefully selected group of journalists who understood the weight of what they were about to hear. Those who were present have described the atmosphere in that room as extraordinary. Her hands, usually so steady, so controlled, so emblematic of the woman herself, were reportedly trembling slightly as she held her prepared notes. Her voice, typically firm and unwavering, was carrying what those present described as barely controlled fury. She began by saying what anyone who knows her would have expected her to say. She said she had remained silent because she believed in the institution. She said she had remained silent because she believed in family loyalty. Racing, I reckoned you had to be nearly 99% out of control to be truly competitive. She said she had remained silent because she believed some matters should be handled privately within the family away from the glare of public scrutiny. And then she said that her silence had become untenable because what she had discovered, she told those journalists, went beyond family disputes and personal grievances. What she had discovered, in her words, went to the integrity of the Crown itself. And then she confirmed it. The Saudi dossier exists. She had seen it. She had read it. She had tried directly, personally, and repeatedly to make Harry understand what it contained. But she did not stop there because she had not gathered journalists at Gatcombe Park simply to confirm the existence of a 10-year-old intelligence file. She had also uncovered something new, something that, if accurate, would represent a betrayal far darker than anything that had previously emerged from the chaos of the Sussex departure. According to Anne, she had obtained evidence, encrypted communications, phone records, documented meetings that proved Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew had been in secret coordination for years, not months, years. Beginning as far back as late 2019, the two individuals who had the most visible and damaging falling outs with a core royal institution had allegedly been sharing insider information, coordinating their public strategies, and building what one source close to and described as a mutual insurance policy against the institution they both felt had wronged them. Let that sink in for a moment. Two people who publicly have nothing in common. A former actress from California who fled the royal family to pursue independence in Montecito, and a disgraced prince who had been stripped of his military titles and effectively exiled from royal life following the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Allegedly working together in secret for years, sharing information, aligning strategies, and building leverage. Princess Anne, according to every account of that meeting, was not performing outrage. She was not playing to the cameras or angling for attention. She was telling the people in that room what she knew, laying it out as plainly as she has laid out everything in her life, because she had come to the conclusion that silence was no longer a viable option. The question this raises, and it is a question we want to pose directly to you, is this. Why now? Why would a woman who has spent over 50 years demonstrating that she values discretion, loyalty, and institutional dignity above personal expression choose this moment to go public? What could she have seen? What could she have discovered that was so significant it overrode a lifetime of restraint? The answer, we would suggest, lies in what she said about the integrity of the Crown. This was not personal anger. This was institutional alarm. This was a woman who has given her life to a specific institution, concluding that the institution itself was under threat from forces operating within its own extended family. And she decided that the only way to protect the Crown was to expose what was happening. The palace in crisis. The reaction from Buckingham Palace was swift, and if you know how to read palace communications, deeply revealing in what it did not say. Within hours of Anne's statement, the palace released what was described as a denial. The allegations were called categorically false and deeply irresponsible. Strong language, unambiguous in its tone. But notice something. The palace did not threaten legal action. They did not call Anne delusional. They did not suggest she was experiencing a breakdown or acting out of personal frustration. They chose their words very, very carefully because when you are dealing with Princess and you cannot afford to choose them carelessly. This is not a tabloid source, not a disgruntled former employee, not a celebrity seeking relevance. This is the Princess Royal, the woman who has served the crown longer and more consistently than almost anyone alive. You cannot simply wave away her credibility. Meghan's team was more aggressive. Their statement called Anne's claims complete fantasy and desperate attention-seeking. Again, notice the strategy. Attack the motivation and the credibility rather than provide specific, detailed denials of specific documented allegations. Meanwhile, the statement from Andrew's legal team was perhaps the most carefully worded of all. It described Anne's characterization as misleading and taken out of context, not false, not fabricated, not invented, misleading, and taken out of context. Language that, as any legal analyst will tell you, implies that something happened, but contests the interpretation. That phrasing is not an accident. Legal teams choose every word with surgical precision when issuing denials. And a denial that doesn't actually deny is in practice a confirmation. Behind the scenes, sources suggest the response was considerably more chaotic than the polished public statements implied. King Charles reportedly convened emergency meetings with senior courtiers and legal advisors within minutes of the story breaking. The questions being asked were both practical and existential. What exactly does Anne have? How much more evidence does she possess beyond what she shared in that room? Until those questions can be answered, it is impossible to craft an effective response. How do you contain something like this in the age of social media? Traditional palace strategies depend on controlled messaging, managed timing, and a sympathetic press corps. None of those tools are particularly effective when the story is being driven by the Princess Royal herself and spreading globally in real time. And perhaps most pressingly, what does this mean for the institution going forward? Because the legal machinery has already begun to move, sources close to the Royal Legal Council report that proceedings are underway on multiple fronts simultaneously, addressing titles, financial arrangements, succession implications, and the terms under which former members of the extended royal family can operate publicly. The terms reportedly being drafted are extraordinarily complex. Senior constitutional lawyers are navigating legal territory that in some cases has not been explored since the 18th century. One source described it as a constitutional puzzle with no modern precedent. An attempt to formally, legally, and permanently restructure the relationship between the Crown and individuals who have complicated, contested, and deeply personal ties to it. And at the center of all of it sits Princess Anne's 11 words. The dossier exists and we tried to tell him. Harry's world turned upside down. Now, let's talk about Prince Harry because in many ways he is the most tragic figure in all of this. Not because he is blameless, but because the story, if accurate, suggests that he was deceived by people he trusted and then abandoned by instincts that could have protected him. Harry's memoir, his Netflix series, his Oprah interview, all of them were constructed around a central narrative. The royal family had failed to protect Meghan. They had allowed the press to destroy her. They had dismissed her struggles and rejected her authenticity. The palace was racist, classist, and fundamentally incompatible with the life he and Meghan were trying to build. But what Princess Anne is now alleging, and what the dossier apparently supports, is that the picture was far more complicated than Harry ever knew. That the warnings he received were not acts of prejudice, but acts of protection. That the intelligence his family tried to share with him was not an attack on Meghan's character, but a genuine alarm about what her background and connections represented in terms of national security. And here is the most devastating element of all of this. If and is correct, Harry didn't just make a mistake. He made a mistake while actively refusing to look at the evidence that might have prevented it. He had access to the truth, or at least to the information that might have led him toward it, and he chose not to engage with it because it didn't fit the story he had already decided was real. That is a profound and painful thing to sit with, whether you are sympathetic to Harry or not. Because the question isn't whether he deserves blame. The question is whether he can ever come back from the realization that the family he accused of betrayal may have been trying, however imperfectly, to protect him. What do you think? Is Harry the victim in this story? Is he the perpetrator? Or is the truth somewhere so complicated that neither label does it justice? We want to hear from you in the comments. William draws the line. Against this backdrop of confirmation, crisis, and chaos, Prince William acted. And when William acts, he he does not do it quietly. At 7:48 in the morning, timed, sources suggest, to hit breakfast television in Britain, afternoon newsrooms across Asia and late-night desks in North America, all simultaneously. A statement was released from Kensington Palace. Not from a spokesperson, not from an office, directly from Prince William himself. That detail alone changed the nature of everything that followed. The statement announced the complete and permanent end to any future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex. No diplomatic softening, no language that left room for future reconciliation or review. No suggestion that circumstances might change, that conversations might continue, or that doors might yet remain open. The door was not closed. It was sealed, bolted, and the key was thrown into the Thames. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. Reuters distributed a breaking bulletin within 4 minutes. CNN pushed an alert across its screen. Sky News and the BBC cut into their regular programming on social media. The topic reached #1 worldwide in under 8 minutes. But what struck royal observers almost as much as the content of the statement was its tone. There was no emotion in it. No personal grievance aired. No reference to past interviews or documentaries or allegations. It was administrative in its language and absolute in its intent. It was the statement of a man who had not made this decision in the heat of the moment, but had been moving deliberately and systematically toward this conclusion for a very long time. A palace staffer described it as a rupture of historic proportions, not just within a family, but within British society itself. Because William is not Charles. William did not grow up in an era when the monarchy could afford to manage its contradictions quietly and hope the public didn't notice. William understands with extraordinary precision that the monarchy's survival in the 21st century depends not on mystery but on credibility. And credibility once damaged by association with people and stories that cannot be defended is extraordinarily difficult to recover. Royal historians were quick to note the precedent. When Diana's Royal Highness title was removed following her divorce in 1996, the decision was handled through official government channels. It was formal, it was procedural, and it was carefully distanced from personal declaration. No one in living memory could recall a future king personally authoring a statement of permanent severance from a member of the extended royal family. William did not just close a chapter. He wrote a new one, and its shadow will stretch forward for a very long time. What comes next? So where does all of this leave us? The Saudi dossier exists. Princess and has confirmed it. The intelligence assessment, if accurate, raises questions about Meghan's pre-royal years that have never been satisfactorily answered. A secret alliance between Meghan and Andrew, two people whose departures from royal life were driven by scandal, has allegedly been operating in the background for years. Prince William has drawn a line so definitive that no amount of time or PR management is likely to erase it. And a royal family that built its reputation on silence is now navigating a crisis that silence can no longer contain. The monarchy has survived extraordinary things. Abdications, world wars, assassinations, divorces, and the devastating public loss of Princess Diana. It has survived because in every previous crisis, there was enough institutional coherence remaining to hold things together. But this crisis is different in character. It does not come from outside the institution. It comes from within, from the extended family, from the figures who should be its most loyal defenders, and from decades of unresolved tension between duty and self-interest. Princess Anne, the woman who has given more than anyone to the ideal of selfless royal service, has chosen this moment to say that she will be silent no longer. That speaks volumes whether you believe her account entirely, partially, or not at all. And we want to know where you stand. So please comment below. The fact that she has spoken at all is the story. The fact that she chose to risk her reputation, her relationships, and the very principles she has built her life on tells you something important about how serious she believes the situation to be. The monarchy will not be the same after this. The only question that remains is what exactly will it become? This is not the end of this story. If anything, it is the beginning of the reckoning that has been building for years. The dossier exists. Princess Anne confirmed it, and the ripples of that confirmation are still spreading. If you found this analysis valuable, if it helped you understand a story that the mainstream media has at best told you only half of, then subscribe now so you don't miss what comes next. Hit the notification bell. Share this video with someone you know who has been following the story because this is exactly the kind of reporting that deserves the widest possible audience. And before you go, tell us in the comments, do you believe Princess Anne? Do you think Harry will ever publicly acknowledge what the dossier revealed? And perhaps most importantly, is there still a version of this story that ends in reconciliation, or is the damage now permanent and irreversible? We will read every comment. We will respond to as many as we can, and we will be back with the next development in this extraordinary story as soon as it breaks because trust us, it is far from over.